Hi there, I'm Stefan Baur and I'm the owner and managing director of BAUR-ITCS. But I'm also X2Go's community manager, event planner and lead evangelist. Which means that I'm usually the one traveling around telling people how great X2Go is, well, unless we're in the middle of a pandemic and the world is covered in death. So, instead of talking to you live on stage as I would usually do, I have recorded this message for you in my little improvised recording studio here, so I can still tell you about a cool piece of software anyone can use for free. But first, let me express my deepest gratitude towards the OpenPOWER Foundation as well as towards the Linux Foundation for having us. It really is an honor to be here today. While we've had a booth at OpenPOWER Summit Europe in Amsterdam back in 2018, we couldn't make it to the 2019 European Summit, nor have we ever been able to make it to the US. Which is too bad, because we might have been able to meet Daniel or Christopher in person. So here's a shout out to you guys. I hope you're watching this, and if not, hopefully someone in the audience knows you and points you to this recording. Now, you may be wondering why we've never been to one of the US or North America summits. Well, this is our neck of the woods, and while X2Go has volunteers from pretty much all over the world, most of the core team members are located in the Central and Western European area, so most of the events we attend are in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. So let's zoom out a bit and see where OpenPOWER Summit North America usually takes place. On the west coast of the United States, so oops, that's quite a distance and a lot of water between us. Coincidentally, the west coast is also where our Power-based X2Go demo server is hosted. Kindly sponsored by Oregon State University's OpenSource lab. By the way, Christopher, that's not the only reason for the shout out, you gotta watch this till the end to find out why. So, how many miles are we talking? Well, about 5,800 miles, or if you prefer metric, over 9,300 kilometers. That's not quite halfway around the world, but almost a quarter. So I guess you can see why, being an open source project on a perpetually tight budget, most of us core team members usually can't take part in US events. That's not to say there's no activity in the US at all. Mike DiPaolo, who currently hails from New York City, and recently joined Red Hat, represented X2Go at a few events in the Philadelphia and Massachusetts areas in the past, but flying him from coast to coast and back would similarly bust our budget. Now, before we start, there are two things I need to apologize for. First of all, sorry, we usually do this live, but this is a recording. While X2Go doesn't need much bandwidth, the video stream does, and while Germany has a no-limits autobahn, its information highway turns into a cobblestone road as soon as you're hitting the outskirts of town. And I think we can all do without 30 minutes of grainy and blurry video. Second, sorry, there's about 10 minutes of text-heavy slides coming up, which are necessary to explain the concept and features of X2Go. We'll have a live demo at the end to make up for that, so please hang in there, it gets better at the end, I promise. Let's have a quick overview of what to expect today. We are just past the introduction slides. We are going to look at what X2Go is. We are going to look at the server side, further advantages of X2Go, and the client side with the thin client edition as well, and finally the live demo and the Q&A and important URLs. So let's have a look at what X2Go has to offer. The two most relevant modes of operation from an end user perspective are remote desktop and remote applications. Let's focus on the remote desktop first. Now, if you've used Windows Remote Desktop Protocol RDP or VNC before, or maybe Citrix XenDesktop, this will look familiar to you. There's two desktops, one basically nested into the other. Let me highlight this for you. So, the highlighted area is the remote desktop and the outer desktop is the local desktop. Like I said, pretty much the same as with RDP or VNC. Two differences though. One, in our case, that inner remote desktop is not a Windows desktop, but a Linux desktop, running on a power machine. Two, we are way faster than what you're used to from VNC. Now, I used to say that on slow links we are faster than RDP as well, but over the last few years Microsoft has done quite a good job at catching up to us, so there will be some edge cases where they are slightly faster, Others where we are slightly faster, but we are pretty much on par these days. So what's this remote applications thing? Again, we have a local Windows desktop, but now instead of having a full remote desktop window blocking major parts of our screen, all we have are two remote applications running seamlessly in our local desktop, just as if they were local applications. In the Wintel world, this used to be Citrix XenApp's domain, until Microsoft started to offer this with more recent versions of RDP as well. On the other hand, if you're a Unix person, you'll probably notice the similarities to X forwarding. You log in via SSH, forward your display, run your graphical application on a remote machine and get the display output back to your local machine. And yes, that's basically what we are doing behind the scenes as well. But we have a few tricks up our sleeves to make things way faster than what you're used to, plus some other neat features. So here's our feature overview. X2Go is like VNC, XDMCP or X forwarding, but on steroids. We offer full screen and windowed desktops as well as seamless modes. We are faster, more responsive. We also have bidirectional audio support and local printing support even for Windows GUI only printers as long as they're connected to a Windows client. We also have local media support for USB storage media, CD, DVD and fixed disks. The only thing we don't have in that aspect currently is generic USB pass-through. That is a feature that is technically possible, but no one has sponsored the development for it yet. And finally, all this is wrapped in a nice and friendly user interface, so you do not have to deal with cryptic shell commands. This is end-user friendly software. But wait, there's more. We also have an optional session broker for large-scale deployments. This allows central administration of users and sessions, as well as load balancing between several X2Go servers. So you suspend your session, you reconnect to the load balancer, and you end up on the same server where your suspended session is parked. Now on the other hand, if you are connecting with a new session, you will end up on the least busy server. Now this feature is actually not that important on Power, and I'll explain later on, once we get past the next two slides, why. We have clients available for all major operating systems, so Windows, Linux, macOS. Our client supports theming and corporate branding. So we have a company logo, a corporate color scheme, no problem. We can add it dynamically, so you do not need a custom build of our client for this. We also have an HTML5 app and Remina integration in the works, and we offer a customizable thin client image build script. So you can deploy your own custom thin client image to your users with additional drivers, VPN or Wi-Fi credentials and whatnot. Now, like I said earlier, X2Go can be used by anyone for free. That is because X2Go is fully GPL, just like, for example, the Linux kernel, VLC media player, Ansible or WordPress. This means no license fees ever, not even for commercial use, and all features are usable immediately and permanently. This is not trialware, there are no time bombs included, no license keys or software activation to worry about, just install and run. And when I say just install and run, this is because it's really easy to try out X2Go. All you need to do is grab a copy of Ubuntu 18.04 or 20.04 or Debian 10 and run these commands on the server and on your client, and you're ready to go. For other distributions and more advanced features like the session broker, you will have to add our own software repository. The instructions for that can be found in our wiki, which is linked here. So let's look at the advantages of X2Go on Power. First, you can keep all your data and all your applications in one place on your Power machine. And Power performance levels and scalability results in that you usually do not need to scale out. One single server is enough. You just add RAM and CPU as needed. So all you need is a bash script with approximately 70 lines of code, comments not included. That's all. That's your session broker if you're using Power on a single server. On the other hand, if you were using a multi-server setup, you would require LDAP, NFS, a central database server, and all of this would have to be highly available. Not so with Power. One box, one script with 70 lines of code. So the entire solution becomes a lot less complex on Power. This allows you to turn your Power machine into a full-fledged graphical terminal server, and if you're using your Power machine with a green screen terminal, you can check if you can phase that out as well. Or if you're using AIX and XDMCP on AIX or X forwarding on AIX, you do not need to pay to get X2Go server ported to AIX. All you do is you install a little Linux LPAR side by side to your AIX installation, and you can use your X2Go server in that Linux LPAR and use it as a jump host to connect to the AIX machine, which in turn will automatically speed up your X forwarding. You also do not need to add Intel or AMD servers to your data center just to be able to work from home during COVID-19. You can use the Power machine you already have, and with SSH two-factor authentication, it's even more secure than hooking a Windows RDP server directly up to the internet. Now, X2Go Client also runs on the Raspberry Pi, so you can avoid the Intel and AMD world even on the client side. A simple Raspberry Pi 3 is good enough as a thin client for X2Go. You can also access your server from anywhere in the world. All you need is an internet connection and your X2Go client. And for office work, you can usually make do with something like between 2 megabits per second per user and as low as 64 kilobits per second per user. So the times where you would download a 100 megabyte document via VPN, make a few edits, try to upload it again, and wait and wait and wait until it completes, those times are over. Because everything happens on the server. And this also brings another advantage. There is no longer a version mismatch between your documents and the applications you are using to edit them. No matter the client device, your desktop always looks and feels the same. Your application versions are the same. Like, you've probably used Microsoft Word before. You uploaded your document, then edited the document, same document, on a different computer with a different version of Word maybe, or a different printer driver, and all your formatting is broken. This simply does not happen here anymore, because all you do on a server. You can also deploy your special purpose Linux apps, like say OpenFOAM for computational fluid dynamics, in seamless mode, so your users aren't confused by a foreign looking Linux desktop. You can use any Windows, Mac OS or Linux computer as a client. You can even bring your own X2Go thin client on bootable USB media on a CD or DVD. And like I said earlier on, we are working on an HTML5 client, so Android and iOS devices will be supported in the future as well. And you can use X2Go to increase your system security, because the typical ransomware coders, they aim for Wintel, not for Linux on Power. So if you run your browser and your mail client on your Linux on Power machine, you get the window displayed on your Windows machine. So you can look but you can't touch. You have a clear separation between the evil internet and your corporate data. And finally, you can use thin clients with a Linux-based Office desktop environment and a branding of your choice. So, like I said earlier, corporate identity theming is not an issue. So let's look at X2Go Client. It's available for all major client operating systems. For Windows, we have a 32-bit client, but it runs on 64-bit as well. We recommend you use Vista or newer with the current client. If you absolutely need to use Windows XP, you can find a client for it in our download archive. It will still connect to a current X2Go server, it just does no longer receive security updates. For Linux, we offer 32-bit and 64-bit clients, even in Big Endian. Same goes for the server as well, by the way. So if you're stuck on a Big Endian Linux distribution on Power, no problem, we have you covered. So we offer binary packages for all the major Linux distributions out there. And while the operating system itself has not reached its end of life, we will have a current X2Go client built ready for it as well. Now for Mac OS, we offer 32 and 64-bit clients for Mac OS 10.5 and 10.6, and 64-bit only for the newer versions. And similar to the situations with Windows XP, We have clients for macOS 10.5 to 10.8 that are still available and working, but out of security support. The ones that are receiving security support are for versions 10.9 to 10.13. And the 10.13 version should work on 10.14 and 10.15 as well. It might require some tweaking of your system settings. So, finally, X2Go Thin Client Edition. We have two flavors of Thin Client Edition. The classic one, this gives you a full screen login window, as you can see in the screenshot, and afterwards you connect to a full screen remote session. The other flavor is Mate Mini Desktop. This is based on the regular version but has some additional features, and we'll cover this in more details later during the demo part. So, X2Go Thin Client Edition. This can be booted via Pixie or via local media, USB, flash, like internal flash of a thin client, fixed disk, CD, DVD. You name it, we have it. We also do not require NFS. So unlike the classic diskless workstation approach that is common in the Linux world, we have no need for NFS. We can make do with FTP, HTTP or HTTPS for net booting. Now, we do need TFTP or iPXE to load the kernel or init.rd, but no NFS server. We do not require any high availability solution for this. And our fixed disk image can even be injected into a NTFS file system and booted via the Windows bootloader. So this can be deployed via existing Windows software deployment tools and does not require reformatting or repartitioning the drive. Net booting aside, this is the fastest way to turn a Windows PC into a thin client. And because we don't reformat the drive, we can provide an easy fallback to Windows in case of problems during the rollout. One extra push of a button during the boot phase and you're back into your old Windows world. So, this was the last text-heavy slide. Next up is the live demo. And for the live demo, we'll boot an X2Go Thin Client. And we won't be using the regular X2Go Thin Client because that's pretty boring. All you would see is a full screen login window on a generic Linux desktop. So instead, we are going to look at Mate Mini Desktop. Mate Mini Desktop features a local desktop with a local taskbar and comes with a local Firefox and or Chrome or Chromium for streaming and conferences. Because this has direct access to a USB webcam, we don't require USB forwarding and have no latency issues for the web conferencing part. This is intended to be used with X2Go's published application mode, but you can use full screen or Windows sessions as well if you want. And we also offer optional local green screen support, so we can integrate X5250 or X3270 emulations into the local client. So Mate Mini Desktop works in general, but still is in beta. Some open bugs remain, and we are actively looking for sponsors to help us iron out these bugs, possibly using Mate Mini Desktop in their production environment later on. So, let's have a look at Mate Mini Desktop. And whoops. This entire presentation you've seen so far has been coming from the server on the West Coast in the US, and the client you are now seeing is located in Germany. Those 9,300 kilometers away I mentioned earlier. And this is live. Well, you're seeing it as a recording now, but for me this is live. We can now see that there's a browser window running in the background. You can see and tell from the different camera perspective. This is a USB webcam feed from my demo laptop. Well, the camera you're seeing for the large screen where I'm in focus, that's a different setup. So what you can see here is Firefox, Chromium, X2Go Client, and the local taskbar. Now, if we weren't using a full Windows, a full Linux desktop here, you would have a second start menu here for the remote applications. So Let's just check the IP address here. You can see that we are located in the southern part of Germany somewhere. You're soaking in it. This is the real deal. And this is the palm olive effect that Christopher referred to in his talk at OpenPOWER Summit North America back in April 2018. Funnily enough, we had the same idea, using that old palm olive ad in our presentations, completely independent of him in June of the same year, when we did a presentation at IBM Zurich. Like I said, for this demo we were using a full remote desktop rather than published applications, because that's easier for you to tell local and remote apps apart, and LibreOffice in presenter mode works better that way. So you saw the Open Chromium window with Jitsi Meet. So one last slide before we show the important URLs. At the 2019 European Summit there was a talk by Daniel Horak from Red Hat, which was titled Desktop on OpenPOWER Systems, Yes. And in slide 14, which we've copied here, you can see he wrote, Demo depends on OpenPOWER laptop, which didn't exist back then, and still doesn't, though there's one in development, as we learned from Roberto Innocenti's talk earlier on. Well, Daniel, no need to wait any longer. Next time, just install X2Go, and yes, we run on Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Fedora too, and you can present your Power-based Linux desktop live on stage during your next talk, just like we did. So, you can find links to all the videos on the last slide. I suggest you watch Christopher's and Daniel's presentations if you haven't seen them. And if you have any doubt that what we have done here today can be done live, then please watch our Zurich recording, because that one was filmed live in front of an audience. So here's a quick recap and a list of important URLs. Remember, on Ubuntu 18.04 and 20.04, as well as Debian 10, you can install straight from the default repositories. Next is the X2Go website and the download URL for Windows and macOS clients, followed by the list of commercial support providers for X2Go and our recommended video links. As this has been a recording, I may have been able to answer your questions during this session. If not, feel free to ask away now. And of course, thank you for watching and thank you for your time.
Hi there. I hope everybody can hear me. So this is the live part now, as you can see by the slightly different outfit. If anyone has questions, please feel free to ask now. There's a question coming up. So there's a question, if X2Go only works on Linux, the server side is only available for Linux, yes. Clients, like I said, are available for all major operating systems, and we're working on an HTML5 client for iOS and Android support as well. And porting X2Go server to different Unixes would, in theory, be possible. So far, there's only been one attempt at porting it to FreeBSD, but that attempt was aborted. The coder that was working on it has just given up on it. But if you have a commercial interest in it, I'm sure we'll have one or two support companies for X2Go that are willing to work on a port in exchange for money. Now, Roberto Innocenti, the PowerPC laptop guy, he asked if X2Go server is running on PPC 64 Big Endian. Yes, as long as your distribution is Big Endian, we have a Big Endian server component and client component for you as well. Roberto, you're welcome. And I'm actually really curious to get my hands on one of your PowerPC laptops once they're available. And Marcus asked if we have a support for PPC 32-bit as client or server. This will depend on your distribution. We are not providing builds for that ourselves, as far as I can tell. But if your distribution packages X2Go client, some do, like Debian and Ubuntu, then you might be in luck. Okay, any further questions that I can answer for you? Feel free to ask away. Nope. So Marcus again, he asked if I could speak about the technical requirements for ports to other platforms. Well, basically, X2Go is based on SSH and on the X window system. So if your operating system uses Wayland or Windows GUI or the Mac OS graphical desktop environment, then no, there will not be an X2Go server for this environment ever. But if you're using X Windows server, then porting X2Go server to this platform is basically possible with enough manpower and enough money. The client side should actually be easier as long as you have an X server for the client system available as well. It will most likely only require downloading the source code and compiling it for the platform you're trying to use it on. And of course, we have mailing lists, which you will find linked on our wiki page. So for more technical questions that a developer could answer better than I could, just subscribe to our X2Go developer mailing list and ask your in-depth technical questions there. Here's a question coming in, whether the desktop we saw is on Power 9. Yes, the demo you saw in the video was running on a Power 9 machine. Marcus again asking, how many sessions can you handle in parallel? That totally depends on the sizing of your machine and what your users are doing. So if they're using, oh wait, there's a follow-up question from, say, on Power 9. So well, the platform is, of course, relevant to this question, but it also highly depends on what your users are doing. Like, if everybody is trying to surf the web, this will cause a higher load than everybody just using Thunderbird and maybe LibreOffice. So it really depends on what your users are doing. Like, you could probably run 200, 500 sessions in parallel as long as they're idle. The question is, how much network bandwidth do you have? How much RAM, how much CPU power do you have in your machine? It's really something that you should try out in a small scale demo environment before starting a rollout. But since we are open source, you can just download it and try it for yourself. You do not need to discuss demo conditions with someone or sign up for some evaluation license. Try it for yourself, see how much your server can handle. Okay. Emily is asking us to wrap things up. So I guess this has to be our last question. So again, thank you everybody for watching. Thanks for asking smart questions at the end. Okay, so let's do this as the last question here. The question is how much it costs for open source developer. Like I said, X2Go is free. Free as in beer and free as in speech. So I guess this is it. You can, of course, also ask questions in the Slack channel later on. I'll be monitoring that for the next few days. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Thanks for asking questions afterwards. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the presentations. Goodbye.